would like to please, ask Mr. Prasad from Eaton to take over and start with the uh, panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Nishtush. Hope you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks. So, hey, thanks, Uma, for giving a very good inputs on digitalization of supply chain and roadmap, what we can surely look at. We do have a panelist, Miss Nikki, Mr. Swaminath, Mr. Subramanyam, and Mr. Gopalan. So I would request them to start their camera so that we can have a good session. Thank you. So to start with, I will give you a small introduction about our panelist, and then we will start with our question and answers. So we do have Mr. Gopalan, who is a head of artificial intelligence Center of Excellence team in Intel Corporations. His team focuses on delivering value by integrating AI and ML model in decision-making workflows, offering AI as a self-service and democratizing AI as well. He has expertise in predictive algorithms, Bayesian regression, NLP, using deep learning. Uh, he is also working on association rule mining and optimization projects as well. We have Mr. Subramanyam, who is heading the he's category marketing and analytics for the Big Basket. In past, he was co-leading the supply chain team at McKinsey. He was also part of Infosys and Ernst and Young, as well as PricewaterhouseCoopers. We have Mr. Swaminath, who is head SCM Center of Excellence at Bharti Airtel. His major focus is developing the roadmap for digitalization and automation of a supply chain process. He is also assessing the current health of SCM projects and develop integrated supply chain solutions. We have Ms. Nikki. She's a co-founder and CEO at Fountain 9. So Fountain 9 is AI-powered algorithm planning provide, which AI-powered algorithm planning provide platform who is taking care of inventory management, and which also integrates different functions of supply chain like demand, inventory, suppliers, pricing, etc. So first of all, thank you team for joining in. I really appreciate you are taking time for this panel discussions. So with this, we will start with the conversation. So I will start with Mr. Swaminath. So Mr. Swami, how do you think that uh, digitalization, what do you say that digitalization mean in supply chain? How do you see it?
Right, right. Yeah, so it's a good question. And digitalization is a word that we hear quite a lot nowadays. And to me, digitalization or digitization in supply chains means a couple of things. One, you design your supply chain function by eliminating any manual touch points and completely make the flow of information real time and seamless. That's one thing. And two, uh, so now you have a fully automated supply chain. And how do I make sure it is optimal? So that is where the other aspect of digitization comes in, which is using your data. We have tons of data nowadays. Every company has tons of data. You have data from your customers, your suppliers, intermediaries, everybody. So how do you use your data to derive meaningful insights and tweak the supply chain to meet your challenges optimally? And this is where AI, ML, they play a role here. And this is the second aspect of digital or digitalization in supply chain that I think is. And just to add, in the words of Professor Martin Christopher, it is no longer companies that compete. Supply chains are the ones that do. So this is increasingly becoming relevant now in the digital age. So digitalization is taking over, and supply chains, I think they have a major role in digitalization and adopting digitalization to optimize and streamline supply chains.
Okay, great. Thanks for input. And with this questions, I think since you mentioned about data is flowing from everywhere, right? And Big Basket is a good example in pandemic where you are the center of discussions when pandemic happens. So my question to Mr. Mani is, in pandemic, right? Which change when you see the pandemic as an example? What change do you feel in digitalization journey for a supply chain?
Thank you, Prasad. Just checking to see if you're able to hear me now.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So for organizations that are predominantly offline, the pandemic was probably a significant trigger to move to an online or an omni-channel path, particularly leveraging digitalization or digitalization as a means to achieve that. For Big Basket, it was a different story, but let me start with a brief introduction of Big Basket. I'm hoping many of you have heard of Big Basket, had the option to shop at Big Basket. So we're India's largest online food and grocery store. We started in 2011. We operated in about 10 tier 1 metro cities and 14 tier 2 cities. And we serve our customers through a variety of modes. The good old 10-year-old planned delivery service that gets delivered through vans or bikes. Our micro delivery service called BB Daily, which delivers milk and other essentials every morning before 7 a.m. if you place your order before 10 p.m. the previous night. And our smart kiosk-based BB Instant machines. These are humanless retail machines, which are set up in corporate facilities and apartment complexes. No touch, contactless, humanless retail service. Customers walk in, use the app, pick the item that they want to buy. The door opens automatically. They pick the item, they walk away, and the transaction is completely online. Money gets deducted from their wallet or their paid preferred method, right? And lastly, even B2B. We serve hotels, restaurants, catering facilities, kiranas, including retail kiranas, wholesale facilities, and so on. So a variety of businesses. And with the more recent investment from Tata, we become part of the larger organization, larger group. So that's Big Basket, right? When it comes to our supply chain, our digitization, even when we started in 2011, we started as an online e-commerce business. So we were digital first business. We were always cloud native, technology enabled business. AI, ML have all been part of our ecosystem from day one. And so we've leveraged that significantly to help make a difference to the customers in terms of customer experience, right? So the pandemic did not necessarily change our digitalization or digitalization path. All parts of our business are already digitized. However, I'll use this option to talk about the effect of wave 1 of the pandemic as well as wave 2 of the pandemic and what happened. How did we use data? How did we use our digital assets to respond to customers, respond to supply and demand changes, right? I'll just rewind the clock for everyone's benefit to go back to the last week of March. A lockdown was announced, and customers had to now quickly figure out ways to augment their supplies, grocery supplies. And we were one of the top names that comes to minds of customers when they talk about grocery and other needs. So we saw a 6x demand surge. So if we are used to having X number of customers, there was now a massive surge, 6x, right? That by itself is a challenge for any organization. When you're demand overnight. At 8 o'clock, the announcement was made. At about 8:15, we saw a 6x demand surge, right? So managing something like that becomes a challenge, not just from fulfilling the demand, but even handling that kind of workload when it comes to your technology system. So we had to focus on scaling up the end-to-end systems, and because we were cloud native, using an auto scaling environment, we were able to quickly ramp up all of our digital assets to handle that kind of workload. Even the analytics workloads had to scale up because we were now tracking real-time data, and the volumes of real-time data went up. So that's one. We haven't even come to full, handling these demand needs of customers in terms of specific products that they were going to order, right? On the other side was a supply crunch. Because traffic was shut down, lockdown conditions are imposed, many of our staff members, and we are a we are a business that employs about 15,000 associates who work in our warehouses, our dark stores, do delivery through last mile delivery service, handle replenishment at a variety of facilities and so on. So we are people dependent and heavily people dependent. And so we saw a massive reduction in staff availability. People either went back home or couldn't commute to workplaces until rules became clear about how e-grocery or e-commerce players could continue to operate for essentials, right? So you have a demand surge coupled with a supply shortage. You have all of the recipe for things just playing out of control, right? Add to that, the added complexity, which was our manufacturers. We work with a variety of brands. We have upwards of 10,000 different labels, including our own private labels, and all of these products had to, move from variety of locations, mother warehouses or facilities of suppliers to our facilities, right? And all of that got disrupted. So we did a whole host of things quickly recognizing. I mean, it obviously took us some time to, get back on our feet. But in the initial days, we did a number of quick things. Number one, take care of our loyal customers that have already been with us, at least for the initial period of time. We shut down the ability to register new customers and deliver to new customers so that we could take care of our loyal customers, right? Very short period of time before we could get back on our feet. Then we began to, recognize that there was a supply and a demand mismatch, right? A massive surge in demand, a dramatic drop in supply. So we use data to quickly do a few things. Number one, do I want to offer all the 35,000 SKUs that I normally offer? Do I want to offer, let's say, a turmeric powder of 100 grams, 200 grams, 500 grams of 6 different labels, Tata Sampann to ITC to Achi Masala to all of that? No, right? So we quickly looked at consumption patterns and figured out what were fastest selling pack sizes, and in fact kept larger pack sizes, recognizing that if customers bought once, hopefully they won't have to come back for 3 weeks, allowing us to serve demand of other customers as well. So we quickly, brought down the assortment from about 35,000 SKUs to 3,000 SKUs, but using data to figure out how to do that. The next thing that we recognize is people were at home. Earlier, we used to offer multiple delivery slots through the day. So you could pick 7 to 10, 8 to 11, 9 to 12, whatever you needed, right? When people are at home and when opportunities outside are very limited, people don't care, whether they want 7 to 10 or 8 to 11. As long as you could deliver, that's sufficient, right? So we quickly moved to what was called mother slots. That allowed us to optimize our delivery service. So instead of going to the same apartment 5 times in a day on a regular day, we would accumulate all such orders together and go there and deliver. Through that, achieve picking efficiency and delivery efficiency. We also did a few other things in terms of capacity planning, but all of our digital assets came into play and helped us use data to make some of these quick decisions. Some of the learning from wave one, despite doing all of this in wave one, I don't think we did a great job of fulfilling customer demand. Some customers were upset because they couldn't come and find slots. We learned and quickly on the feet developed some features. Because we were a startup, we were able to quickly build this and get them up and running. For example, we built a token system, allowing customers to come onto the site, pick up a token, know when to come and place an order and get delivery, instead of coming in and seeing that slots were not available and getting frustrated. Some of which actually helped us eventually when we moved to wave 2. In wave 2, we were better prepared and were able to roll out some of these features such as mother slots, priority for old customers, token systems, assortment reduction, and through that, hopefully delivered a better experience to customers this time versus last time. But all of it was possible because our supply chain assets are digitized. We use data heavily and we're able to use a host of algorithms to sort of deliver a great experience, or at least a better experience to our customers. So that's a great quick response. I'll come back to this if you need more details.
Thanks. I think very good inputs from your side, how you reacted to the pandemic situations, and couple of data-driven decisions really made an impact. So now next question is Ms. Nikki, over to you. So with reference to companies like who do have the legacy systems, right, and they do have the ERPs and maybe a specialized tools for the MRPs to run and take care of their supply and demand. So how do you see that AI ML will impact on inventory planning?
Yeah, I would say, like, when it comes to inventory planning, one of the most important starting points for efficient inventory planning is future demand prediction, right? And then most of the systems or tools out there still typically use more of the traditional statistical prediction methods, like something like moving averages, exponential weighted moving averages. And what happens with that is there are some inherent challenges with regards to these types of, these types of statistical methods, which AI or ML based algorithms can actually, they have a much bigger upper hand over these methods. And I'll share some examples where. So I want to specifically point about three things. So one is traditional, methods. They rely heavily only on historical sales data. And as we all know, right, there are so many different factors that influence future demand. So it's, of course, there are trends from historical data that we have to learn, but there are several other factors. So for example, if you're giving any promotion on personal care, now it can have a different impact on something like of a Vaseline product versus Dove versus Mamaearth, and that, like price elasticity of different products could be different. And how do we account for all of that, right? Like now typically then, people will use heuristics where they'll make these adjustments, because when you have like hundreds and thousands of products, how do you then even come up with these heuristics, right? That becomes a challenge. But then when you are deploying something like a machine learning or an AI algorithms to help understand these relationships between demand drivers to actual demand, then you're able to capture the future demand in a better way. And there are several other these kinds of factors, right? Like there's marketing spend levels, promotions, impact of holidays, weather, holiday dates also keep changing, like in India, like Diwali last year versus this year could be like on different dates completely, right? So it basically, a machine learning algorithms help capture the impact of different drivers in a much better way where, traditional methods lack, right? So that's number one. The second example I would give is when we talk about, like the sensitivity to historical volatilities. So for example, if in the past you've had stockouts, right? Now, when you use something like moving average, then you will actually under predict your future demand because it's relying on historical data which had stockouts. So you're under predicting future demand, which is leading to more stockouts. And then that cycle never breaks, right? Now with ML algorithms, we can actually then differentiate whether that drop in demand is because, or like drop in sales, is that because demand actually dropped, or was it a factor of availability issues or not having inventory levels or some supply side disruptions, right? And then it can be modeled more appropriately. And then the third thing I would point out is things like cannibalization effects. So if a product is not available, then demand moves over to something else, right? Like, so if Nescafe products are not there, some product is not there, people will buy brew. Now at some point, Nescafe will also become available. So then that demand will shift over, right? And that constant fluctuation keeps happening. Now, again, with traditional systems, you will probably, because you see a surge in brew, you will start overstocking on brew, but that has to happen only for a certain period of time. And then things have to switch back to where the demand is again, evolving based on availability of data, right? So all of these scenarios get much better captured when you have more powerful algorithms. And these are some challenges, like some very key challenges that affect future demand, which traditional methods cannot, cannot capture. And that's where then a lot of manual intervention, heuristics-based adjustment is required.
Okay. Thanks for that input. I think with that, I think we all talk about supply chain as a integration from customer side to production side to the supplier side, right? So my next question to Mr. Gopalan is how AI and ML will address, also improve and communicate this SCM decision management process across the ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you, Prasad. To some extent, Nikki covered the key aspects of how AI plays in demand forecasting, right? If you look at any entity or any enterprise, the core supply chain operations can be broadly divided into inventory planning and control, price determination, and demand forecasting. These are three broad areas where AI can be, quite extensively applied, regardless of the vertical, right? It could be retail, it could be core manufacturing, it doesn't matter. If you are dealing with supply chain, these are the three broad areas where you can apply AI and ML techniques. Coming to talk about how we can improve some of the existing processes, I would kind of build on what Nikki mentioned, right? Today you may be doing some portions of your business with the traditional statistical methods, and you have ton of data. Now AI gives you the additional power to bring in the factors that you have not considered in your traditional statistical method, like environmental factors, macroeconomic factors, risks that are associated with supply chain due to natural calamities. Can we bake these factors into our overall forecasting, for example, in a forecasting scenario? Because you may be doing very traditional approaches like exponential smoothing or a moving average technique. Instead, today AI offers to bake these additional factors also, and to really see which are these factors that are playing a crucial role in predicting your demand or making your forecast much more accurate. So that ability is there, and the possibility of experimenting and figuring out which are the right features that I want to bake it in my model, right? Whereas statistical models are fairly rigid, whatever, they are not amenable for additional incorporation of additional factors. If you look at a traditional Holt winter forecasting technique or an ARIMA technique, you can't do anything more beyond that. Whereas AI is a lot more flexible according to your entity's requirements, according to your entity's needs. You can bake those factors into your model and then figure out which are the key factors that are playing into your, say, for example, do they improve your demand forecasting accuracy? That is something, today that option to experiment is available. This is where I see a good need moving or shifting from statistical based techniques to an AI-based technique, and from a almost like a rule-based approach to a more experimentation-based approach to really figure out whether it is working or not. Again, I don't say that AI is the panacea for every problem that a supply chain is facing, right? There are cases where AI hasn't worked because your data may not be ready, or amenable to an AI-based approach. So you got to really try it out. It's exactly fundamentally like the tools that you have in your toolbox, right? Now, how do you become a master carpenter? Only by trying out and then figuring out which are the right tools I can use. The tool sets are available to all. I was looking at the chat, people are asking which course I need to take. That is just the basics. Then comes the art part of implementing, regardless whether it is supply chain or sales and marketing, it doesn't matter, right? Then the art part comes. That is where you experiment, figure out, and then see which is the right approach you will adopt. When it comes to communication, the same thing, right? Today, with powerful data visualization techniques and with AI ML algorithms, you have now a much more sophisticated ability to communicate across your supply chain partners. Even to take a simple classical, the bullwhip effect, for example, you can model it with elegant ML techniques and then communicate across your supply chain partners on how information distortion causes demand forecasting or forecasting distortion, right? So it is all a question of how do you apply these techniques and which is the right place to apply. That's how I would kind of look at this question, or the approach in bringing AI into supply chain, right? I also want to leave you with one interesting thought, which is regardless of whether it is supply chain or any other domain, because if you look at our work, we not only work in supply chain, we also pretty extensively work in product development, product validation space, right? How we can bring AI into this. The simple mantra in all these places is you got to look at design. When you want to look at designing an intelligent system, all you need to look at is how, it's like very much like human beings, right? You are trying to design an intelligent system. So what are the sensors that are there as part of the system? That is very, very important. What are the sensors that you have got? The sensors could be even simple application logs of an application, right? Very, very important. Using the sensors, you figure out what is the state of the system. You now know, you now have an idea of the state of the system. Now you have got a set of goal or metrics to achieve, and you have got some prior knowledge available or external knowledge available. Prior knowledge could be the historical data. External knowledge could be the environmental factors, macroeconomic factors, whatever they could be, right? Can you now blend all of this and take an action, and then see how the system is responding back to you? This is how you build a learning loop into the system, right? Because AI systems are learning systems, like human beings, right? We continuously learn by interacting with the environment through our sensory apparatus, the pancha indriyas that we are equipped with, right? We interact, we learn from the environment, and then we adapt continuously. That's how AI systems also have to be designed. They are not stale. They are like children. They continue to evolve. They continue to learn. This is a simple sutra that I want to share, right? The architecture of artificial intelligence is what you need to think first before jumping into, oh, let me go, bring AI into demand forecasting or inventory planning or price determination. Tell me which algorithm I need to use, right? No, think like how a human being will operate in an environment. The sensors, the state of the system, the action that you will take, and the response that you will get from the system, and how will you learn and adapt your response, or how will you adapt, learn from the system, and then how will you tune your actions further. That is the sutra you got to take, and then you will see wider vistas of opportunities opening up for you, right? You can then, once you get this AI mindset, you can, opportunities and problems will start opening up for you. With that, I will pause you.
Thanks, Mr. Gopalan. I think very good inputs. And while mentioning that AI is an art, right? And the tools or the algorithms or different libraries will be available. How you will use it and customize it with reference to your problem is important. So with that, I will switch to Mr. Swami for asking one question. So usually all the industries are having their own legacy system as an ERP, right? When you looked at the roadmap aspect, do we need to think about bringing some new ERP system into place or new tools into the place, or we need to look at any digital layer or threads who will help us to take it forward?
Right, right. See, I think one thing we all understand is that there is no one size fits all tool that caters to every supply chain of every industry, in fact. So ERP products that are currently there, right? So while they serve the purpose, they either have an overload of features sometimes. Not all features will be relevant to you. You may end up using only one small bit of what they offer, or they may actually lack functionality for a specific industry with a unique functionality that no other industry may have. So that particular industry feature or that particular industry looking to adopt ERP may find it lacking or a functionality lacking in your ERP. So what happens then is when you need customization to force fit the tool to do what you want. So this is how customizations get built up in systems, and the number of such force fittings they shoot up, and you end up having hardly a standard out of the box feature in an ERP sometimes. So I think this is where, considering some of the problems that ERPs may have, there is opportunity for a specific niche product with functionality or capability that addresses a critical issue and also at the same time accounts for a big chunk of your process needs. So niche tools having unique capabilities, AI ML capabilities, they have the ability to fulfill the demands or needs of an organization, by bridging the gap between as is and to be process of that organization without looking at a holistic ERP solution as such.
Yeah.
So I think this is where I feel that while having ERPs are definitely something that you need to consider, you need to have ERPs, but then also having the best of breed tools, the niche products, they are increasingly on the playing a role in bridging a gap between what actually you need and what the ERP offers.
Hey, great, thank you. I know there are a lot of questions are flooding into the chat box. I have 3 questions to cover up, and then I will pass it to the Nishtush to talk about. So my next question is about real-time analytics or streaming analytics, right? Where when we are talking about sensors, we are talking about data which is flowing in. I think this data will surely need first to consume, and based on that consumptions we need to take decisions, and Mr. Mani already covered that into their briefing, but how do you Mr. Mani, from the big basket perspective, when you see the futuristic aspects of US structure, right? How do you see that? How do you sense it?
Yeah. Real-time data analytics sort of make a potent combination when it comes to talk about very cool topics, right? And I'll sort of elaborate on that in the context of grocery and online commerce. And I'll also use this option to share my perspective on AI ML as well. Gopalan brought it up very well earlier, right? He said, be careful, it's not the panacea for everything that you do. And I want to emphasize that very, very strongly. And then I'll talk about real-time analytics. There's a hierarchy, right? A natural evolving hierarchy when it comes to techniques, methods, etc. So you have heuristic systems, people coming up with answers, thumb rule based approach. And then you evolve to using OR techniques, operations research techniques, or even rule based systems, even before you move to sophisticated techniques. Then OR statistics, then a machine learning techniques, and then deep learning techniques, right? So as you progress through this, from heuristics to rule based systems to statistical methods to machine learning to deep learning, what you're certainly achieving is being able to consume a large volume of data from a variety of independent variables that could be impacting a dependent variable. It could be sales forecast, material forecast, whatever the case could be, that being the dependent variable, and a host of independent variables. So you're able to process large volume data, do it real time, and understand the significance of the independent variables on the dependent variable. And as you in fact get to the point of using deep learning techniques, you're even now leaving the system to engineer the features. The system is determining what are relevant features and factors that into the model and tells you, this variable that you never thought had an influence on the dependent variable actually has an impact, right? So your accuracy is going to improve, but be very cautious of the fact that your explainability goes down, right? And you are not going to be able to guarantee that this is going to, you even have a sense of what drove this. Because the model predicted my sales is going to go up, does it mean that I need to increase my ad spend in my local market? Is it ATL spend, BTL spend, whatever that may be? So the explainability goes away, and therefore be conscious of this. Don't try a technique just because it's cool and jump into it and use it. See if you could build a model that progresses reasonably. I mean, all of this that we talk about in machine learning models today, logistic regression models, linear regression models, random forest models, are all backed by solid statistical principles. So they don't appear magically. And so if you understand the underlying math and the underlying application, then you're likely to use these models meaningfully and have them sort of drive the impact for you, right? Having said that, I'll quickly move to real time and how you apply analytics. So we apply the same principles at work when it comes to real time and analytics. All of these things are fantastic, very, very cool things to have. IoT sensors, real time data streaming in. But recognize how you use them and what impact you deliver. Either it benefits the customer or improves your bottom line or your top line, right? If it doesn't, then there's no point in putting in something. For us, real-time data comes in from a variety of sources. For example, as users browse the website, app, etc., streaming data flows in. It helps us understand what challenges customers face and take meaningful actions. We also use real-time data in the form of IoT systems that help track conditions in a van or in our last mile supply chain when goods move from or products move from our facilities to customer doorsteps, right? It helps measure temperature changes and take actions to see if there is a process breakage or instrument breakage that's causing the product temperature to fluctuate through the journey and thereby impacting the customer experience. But you have to have meaningful use cases to apply real-time analytics. People end up using real-time data, streaming data for just doing nudges to encourage customer behavior. We recognize that in grocery it doesn't work. An average basket at the beginning of the month is anywhere from 18 items, 18 SKUs to 20 SKUs. So just because the customer added a potato to give them a nudge and say, place an order, here's 100 rupees to place an order is meaningless, right? People have shopping lists, they work with shopping lists. So we use real-time data in a very meaningful manner. Some of the use cases where we use are, where this gets applied, number one is build nudges in a meaningful manner. For example, people may not understand that they get free delivery after they reach a certain basket value. So when the customer's cart is sort of gotten to that point, we create a nudge using real-time data to let the customer know you could place your order now, right? Or if there's a great offer for them, this is a customer that regularly uses ICICI Bank cards and there's an offer running on ICICI Bank, we nudge them to place an order, and through that make that experience great. Also, we use real-time data during situations that cause exceptions, systemic issues. For some reason, our app had issue, or our stock went out of whack, and therefore customers saw maybe a significant number of products being out of stock. As soon as the issue gets fixed, we know customers that were on the app website at that point in time and the issue occurred. Sending them a note, apologizing for the experience, but letting them know that they could come back and have a seamless shopping experience are examples of how we use real-time data. So that's use cases where we use that. Also, we use real-time data in more impactful places as well. Our route planning is fairly complex. It's unlike most of the e-commerce facilities, which is point to point. The customer places an order, let's say a food order, you pick up from a restaurant, bring it and drop it to the customer's place. In our case, it's a milk run. So the items or orders for multiple customers go in a single van, gets picked up from a dark store, and gets delivered to maybe about 10 customers before the van comes back to the dark store. So we do route planning using Google real-time data, using traffic situation at a point in time, but recognize that the van leaves at 5 o'clock for a delivery between 6 to 9. By the time the van gets to the last 3-4 customers' destination at 8 o'clock, the traffic conditions have changed. It's maybe there's a downpour now, and so you want to factor that in and use that to rework the route plan if necessary, or at least let the customers know that there's going to be a delay in delivery so that they are not left waiting and have a terrible experience. So in such cases, we use real-time data analytics and help deliver a good experience to customers. So they're quick examples of how real-time streaming data gets used in our world. Yeah.
Okay, great. I know we have last 2 minutes to cover up because Nishtush also needs to cover 2 topics. So a quick answer, Nikki, from your side, right? When we talk about digitalization, transformation, and ROI, as a startup, what's your pitch? What challenges you go through?
Sure. Yeah. So I think for us, like one of the biggest challenges is one is availability of data. Now, while there's a lot of data that is getting captured, there is a lot of data that is not getting captured also. And especially when it comes to marketing side of things, which has a significant influence on future demand, like promotions, campaigns, the calendar at which it's run, spend levels in different channels. Those are things which are like most organizations that we work with don't have it in a systematic manner for us to use it. And so what we've done is then in the solution that we offer, we've now started creating ways for people to plan those things through the tool itself, so we can capture that data in a systematic manner through our promotions planner and then use it into our algorithm. Then the other challenge that we face is change management, which is people don't switch overnight, right? Because they're used to doing things a certain way. Overnight, they're not going to just start to rely on a system to give them recommendations. So a lot of work that we do is around explaining on why the algorithms are, and to the points that Mani also talked about, right? Like making sure that people understand why the predictions are in a certain way, what is influencing that. There's a lot of effort that we put into to give that explainability. And what we are also doing over time is trying to create ways where right now we do this through our working sessions with the teams, and we are also creating ways where we can break it down. So while we include a lot of factors, what is the impact of a certain factor versus some other factor? And it's actually not a very easy thing to do, but we are still trying to create ways where we can provide explainability, which can help build trust into what the system suggests. And then that is where people then feel confident about switching over to something else when they can understand why it is suggesting what it is suggesting, right? So those are some of the typical things that we face, and how we are, the approach that we are taking to overcome these challenges that come our way.
Okay, thank you. My last questions to Mr. Gopalan, right? When we talk about AI, ML, or blockchain and new technology, cybersecurity is important aspect, right? Everybody is talking about it. So what is your perspective, how we should manage it?
See, as Mani mentioned, more and more enterprises are also now becoming cloud native, right? That's the first thing. And then the other transition that we have now seen is earlier it used to be physical first and digital next. Now it is the other way, digital first and then physical next. I see my BBMP property tax certificate first in my browser, and if needed, I take a printout. So that's how today the scene is, right? Everything is out as a digital. So it brings its own challenges, which is the threat of someone accessing the data or someone misusing the data, right? So when I now apply it to a supply chain paradigm, it is all about how the entire supply chain is secure. It is not the individual entities that are secure, but how we secure the entire supply chain. Like Swami also mentioned, right? Today the competition is between supply chains. It's not between entities. So given that, now how do we even formalize our contracting mechanisms with our supply chain partners, where we bake security by design? It's not an afterthought anymore. By design, can we bring in standards? What are the hardware standards that our supply chain partners have to conform to? What are the software standards that they need to conform to? Can we even look at some level of compliance standards? How we will interact with the supply chain partners, at what level of security compliance each of our partners have to ensure. This is, I would say, more like a pre-attack phase, right? I would, I'll leave you with a simple framework, pre-attack, trans-attack, and post-attack, right? Because anytime, even with all this preparation, it's a cat and mouse game. Still, enterprises do come under cyber attack. So pre-attack phases, this is what we are, few things that we can do. There are again plenty of other things. From my little knowledge in cybersecurity, these are few things I can think of. During attack, what do you do? So can you quickly now, can we build some mechanisms by which we can quickly validate data consistency? Is there a data hack that is happening? Across the supply chain, can we do a data consistency check? This is something else. One more thing I was kind of thinking about. Post-attack, can we then collectively look at the forensics, because any attack leaves a trail in the entire supply chain, or could be with one supply chain partner, right? Can we have mechanisms by which the forensic detail of that particular partner can be shared across the supply chain, so we all learn from it and then prevent a similar attack happening again, or protect ourselves at a much higher elevated level of security? And can we come up with insurance mechanisms by which the entire supply chain is protected, not just an individual entity? These are few thoughts I have on how a supply chain can prepare itself for a cyber attack, right? Pre-attack, during attack, and post-attack. These are few mechanisms that they can put in place to secure themselves from such an attack.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. I think very, very good inputs. So I know we overshooted the time. So Nishtush, over to you just to talk about
Yes.
how we will manage the Q&A.
Sure. So pretty good insights, and and that's why we are having a lot of questions on that. But due to the shortage of time, we'll just take one question for each panelist there. And if I would request if we can have a short and quick answer to that. All right. So I'll start with the question for Mr. Mani. How is the customer spend pattern being utilized to evolve further to optimize operations?
So there are many levels of response to that question, but I'll tackle one that I can quickly answer or provide as an answer. Number one is that this is grocery purchase. Most customers need many of the products in many of the categories that we offer: fruits, vegetables, staples, branded food items, general merchandise, and so on. What we recognize is that customers that are in the early stage with us, who placed maybe just about 5 orders with us, behave very differently from customers that have probably been with us for more than a year. They've discovered the range that we have and are able to find products that we have and buy that. So using average order value or average monthly spend of customers, we are able to figure out who are customers that are early in the journey and how do we surface products to them that we know they need. But are not buying from us because probably haven't discovered the range with us, right? And so we use that mechanism to sort of generate recommendations and through that or offers or personalized communication to the customers to get them to discover the range and buy those products, right? So that's one way of analyzing customer spend patterns and making recommendations to them.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll take the next question is for Miss Mickey, for Miss Nikki, sorry. So, this is why Mr. Parishek, and he says that they are looking at promotion planning in the retail business, also leading indicators, weather forecasts, etc. Wanted to understand how to implement such solutions in practical environment, as these require a lot of investments in sensing demand. So sensing means factors, inputs in demand. So
Yeah, well, the short answer would be you can partner with us. That is what we do. So that would be my short answer. But of course, like if you were to do it on your own, you would have to, have the right team to help capture all of these, like factors, which could be through externally publicly available data sets, things that you would scrape from the web, and as well as your first party data, right? Like, so I mean, sure, like it does require investment either in terms of building a team and building out things in-house, and which can take several years. And the other options are you can partner with, companies who are doing this, right? So in our solution, we actually have open source, data sets that we bring and, help capture this. We have frameworks where we can establish how you can bring in promotions and pricing and how that influences your future demand, and so on. So it's one of the two options, right? I mean, of course, like while it does require effort and time either on your own teams or work with partners who can help you establish that, but it's possible.
perfect, great. So I'm just going to take the next question is from Mr. Gopalan. Current supply chain methods are seen too slow for information flow till the execution decision is taken. Until then, it's so late. How does AI ML help in getting the information flow faster through the chain?
Is the question posed in the context of a physical supply chain? Because that's where I suspect information flow will be slow. Otherwise, if it is, if the data capture is happening in the digital format, then there should not be, of course, there are lags, because of synchronizing the transactional data, maybe with a potential data lake system, and then from a data lake system, an ML system, right? That could be the lag, but I'm not foreseeing a lag beyond that. If it is, if the whole, if the data capture to the data analysis and data insights stage, if it is all captured digitally, then, that should not be a significant delay unless, the sync up between a transactional system with a data lake system happens at certain periodicity, right? That's where I see a delay. But coming to the, if you're talking about a physical, if the data capture is happening in a physical form where somebody fills a sheet and then you capture, then it is a totally different paradigm, there will be delay. But if you want to create a sentient human being, a sentient system which, responds to to a stimulus instantaneously, like us, right? When you have a bruise or a cut, you realize it instantaneously, very close to real-time analytics, right? Human beings are designed like that. So if you want to create that, then digitalization or digitization is the only way by which you can accelerate the data reaching to the compute where the ML models are sitting, so that you can, it need not be even ML models, right? It could be even a flat BI report. But for you to have a sentient system which can quickly respond, then you got to look at ways by which you can digitize the transaction, right from transaction to the analytics layer, right? That's how you can do it quickly. If it is a physical system, there are going to be issues.
Perfect. So the last question for the day, this is from Mr. Swami. Single ERP tool may not serve the business need. Any suggestion on how to define a robust supply chain technology stack?
Sure, right. So I'll take a shot at this. So I think what we can do is look at your process in terms of a value stream, or break it down into process areas, your entire supply chain. And clearly define very well defined KPIs. Clearly come out with very well defined KPIs for each of those process areas, and then look at your ERP and see if your KPIs are met by the functionality of that ERP? If yes, then maybe you have one single ERP for everything. But maybe no. Most of the time your KPIs, most of your KPIs may not be met by that particular tool. Then I would say go for look at something else that may work for you and that will also actually bring in your KPI to the level that you want to. So that way you will have a process and also a kind of analytical approach to manage your technology stack as well, in terms of what you want to have and how many systems you want to have or how many peripheral systems you want to have surrounding your ERP.
Perfect. I think we still have almost 2 questions each for the speakers, but the paucity of time, we wouldn't be able to take that. I'd request all the audience to please connect with the speakers on LinkedIn and you can take up your questions with them. So just stay online, everyone. Just a quick closing note by Mr. Vishy, Vishwanathan, we call Vishy. I'm handing over to him and then, we can close.
You need to unmute, Rishi.
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking. Thank you very much, Nishtush, for this great session. I think we wish to express my gratitude to the team Aton for taking this initiative and hosting this 11th edition of SCPC. And we thank Mr. Umakant Nair for setting up the keynote speech and setting the context from Aton perspective in terms of expectation, in terms of how the journey in supply chain they are going through. And it was a clear, very informative thing. And also we like to acknowledge our gratitude to Mr. Prasad Kannade for moderating an interesting panel discussion, which it triggered a lot of insights with a very clear inputs from all the all the team members. It was a great inputs from Mr. Gopalan of Intel and Mr. Subramaniam of Big Basket, Mr. Swaminathan of Bharati Airtel, and Ms. Nikki from Fountain 9. Thank you very much for having a great session and great insights. And very thought-provoking, and that's clearly coming out from the questions and the interest what it has triggered from the multiple industries what you represented, and clear insights and thoughts. Thank you very much for your inputs. And we thank our SCPC directors, Mr. Arvinder and Mr. Rakesh Sinha, and the SCPC steering committee for providing continuous guidance and the direction for the team. And also last but not the least, the SCPC action team, Nishtush, clearly a great host, and Novarex team for sponsoring the quiz and also bringing a lot of support in organizing this. And also the action team members like Ram Prakash, Murugan and Tejashwini, and for supporting this event, put together the event in a meticulous way so that we are all having together and having some good knowledge sharing session. Thanks a lot for your time. And with that, I say that the event gets closed. Thank you very much for all your time and participation.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you.